More Canadians are seeking out Disney magic across the Atlantic Ocean, even as global travel trends remain strong and fewer foreign visitors head to the United States. Travel agencies and companies specializing in Disney vacations say many Canadians are following through on promises to boycott travel to the US.
Disney's U.S. theme parks are now facing the strongest boycott they have ever seen, and it's coming straight from Canada. Canadians aren't just skipping Florida or California. They are willingly paying more to fly across the Atlantic, choosing Paris, London, and Singapore before even considering a trip into the United States. The message is unmistakable. Canadians would rather cross an ocean than cross the U.S. border under Trump's America. What started as a quiet shift in travel habits has now become a continental shockwave, dragging America's tourism industry from Disney to airlines to entire state economies into a downturn it never expected.
Over the past year, travel patterns have changed so sharply that they've redrawn the tourism map of North America. Canadian trips into the U.S. fell by millions. Road travel dropped sharply, air travel weakened every single month, and January 2026 marked the 12th straight month of double-digit declines. The overall number of Canadian visitors fell by more than 4 million in a single year, which represents a collapse of more than 20% compared to the year before. This now includes the Disney effect. For decades, a Disney vacation meant flying to Orlando or Anaheim. But Canadian travel agents report something entirely new. Families who once visited U.S. parks every year now refuse to set foot in America. Many are choosing Disneyland Paris or combining a short Disney stop with longer European itineraries, while others are moving their plans to Asia. Some families openly say they won't return until the political climate in Washington changes completely. Others say they want vacations free of stress, without worrying about unpredictable border treatment or political drama. The result is a massive redirection of tourism spending away from the United States and toward markets that feel more stable. Meanwhile, America's broader tourism industry is absorbing the financial shock. International travel to the U.S. as a whole has fallen even as global tourism grows elsewhere. And it is Canada, traditionally the #1 source of foreign visitors, that is driving the steepest decline. Disney executives have already acknowledged weaker international visibility and are shifting their marketing strategy toward domestic customers because the flow from abroad is evaporating.
What makes this moment extraordinary is that Canada didn't announce a boycott. No government campaign, no official statement, just millions of Canadians quietly choosing different destinations. That silent choice delivered a $4.5 billion blow to the U.S. economy in a single year. Analysts once warned that if Canadian travel dropped 10%, the economic hit would be severe. Instead, the real decline was more than twice that level, and the damage is now spreading across multiple sectors that rely heavily on Canadian tourism.
Canadian families are incredibly practical about travel. They want predictability, safety, and a vacation free from unnecessary tension. Under Trump's leadership, the U.S. brand has become associated with volatility. Canadians mention everything from erratic political decisions to harsher immigration enforcement to rhetoric that makes allies feel unwelcome. Some recall threats aimed at Canada itself or proposals that undermined long-standing cooperation. The result is a widespread sentiment that visiting the United States no longer feels comfortable, and in travel economics, comfort is everything.
Disney is more than a tourist destination. It is a symbol of American culture and a benchmark of U.S. soft power. When Canadians refuse to visit U.S. Disney parks and redirect their spending to Europe or Asia, it signals a deeper shift in global sentiment. Families who once spent thousands of dollars annually in Orlando are now spending that same money in Paris, Singapore, or Tokyo. This isn't just a loss of theme park revenue. It is the erosion of America's cultural influence, and it is happening faster than Washington expected.
The Canadian retreat is only the beginning. Travel analysts are already observing similar patterns among visitors from Europe and parts of Asia. Even as tourism worldwide hits record highs, the United States is missing out. Entire regions of the United States are beginning to feel the loss, and for many states, the damage is now being measured in hundreds of millions of dollars. In Washington state, border towns that once relied on millions of annual Canadian shoppers are reporting some of the steepest declines. With average per-trip spending around $180, the loss of 25 to 30% of Canadian visits translates into $400 to $500 million in lost revenue each year. Across northern New England, Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, tourism-dependent towns report revenue drops ranging from 20 to 40%. Economists estimate the regional hit is now $350 to $450 million annually. Florida, the state most dependent on Canadian snowbird travel, faces an even larger blow. With typical Canadian trips costing $1,800 to $2,400 per person, the 15 to 18% decline now represents $900 million to $1.2 billion in lost annual revenue. Orlando alone is missing $150 to $200 million that once came directly from Canadian families visiting theme parks. California is seeing similar consequences. Nearly one-fifth fewer Canadians means $600 to $750 million vanishing from hotels, restaurants, and amusement parks, including Disneyland. Even Nevada is not immune. Las Vegas is losing high-spending Canadian visitors at a rate that equates to $250 to $330 million in lost economic activity. These states spent decades building tourism infrastructure around reliable Canadian travel. When those travelers pull back, the financial ripple is immediate, deep, and unavoidable.
Beyond state borders, entire industries are entering crisis mode. Hotels and resorts relied heavily on Canadians, who typically spend between $1,500 and $3,000 per trip. With 4 million fewer visits, U.S. lodging revenue alone has suffered $6 to $10 billion in direct losses. Airlines are facing their own shock, with average round-trip fares between Canada and the U.S. ranging from $280 to $410. The 18% decline in Canadian air travel means carriers have lost $1.2 to $1.6 billion in revenue. Retailers near border crossings, from duty-free stores to outlet malls, are now reporting losses equal to $500 to $800 million annually as weekend Canadian shoppers disappear. And then comes the entertainment sector. Canadian families typically spend $3,000 to $4,500 on a Disney trip. With demand down roughly 30% for U.S. parks, Disney is missing an estimated $400 to $600 million per year from Canada alone. When combined with broader industry effects, U.S. amusement parks collectively are losing $1 to $1.4 billion. The cumulative damage paints a clear picture. Canada's tourism retreat is not a symbolic gesture, it is a multi-billion-dollar economic event.
This is not merely a story about fewer Canadians going to Disney World. It is a broader shift in how the world perceives travel to the United States. Canadians have made their choice clear, and now others are following. As 2026 unfolds, the central question becomes unavoidable. If 1 year of Canadian travel hesitation can erase billions from America's economy, what happens if this trend becomes the new normal? For now, the verdict from Canadian travelers is unmistakable, and America is feeling the consequences.
Now, while we can't control what the U.S. does, we can decide what happens here. This is Canada, and we can build the future we want for ourselves. We can get that money back and more.
Canada just delivered its strongest reply yet to Donald Trump's aggressive tariff regime,
Prime Minister Mark Carney has unveiled Budget 2025, a sweeping trillion-dollar national investment strategy that he says will take back control of Canada's future, rebuild the country's industrial core, and recover the economic damage caused by U.S. protectionism. And this time, the message is unmistakable. Canada is not waiting for Washington. Canada is acting for itself. At a moment when U.S. tariffs are reshaping North American trade, when global alliances are fracturing, and when economic uncertainty hangs over the country, Carney's budget is more than a policy document. It is a declaration of national resolve. It marks the beginning of a new economic direction designed to protect Canada from external shocks and give the country room to chart its own path. Today, we take you through what happened, why it matters, and how this moment may permanently reshape Canada's economic destiny.
Mark Carney stepped onto the stage in Ottawa with members of his caucus, including newly joined MP Chris D'Entremont, and immediately framed Canada's current moment in historic terms. Nations, he reminded the audience, face rare hinge moments when the future hangs in the balance and when leadership determines whether a country rises or stagnates. For Canada, he argued, that hinge moment is now. Rapid technological disruption is redefining entire industries. The world is becoming more volatile and divided, and the global trading system, one Canada has relied on for decades, is being rewired in real time. Carney delivered the number that set the tone. U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty created by Trump's protectionist policies are expected to cost Canada nearly 2% of its GDP. That translates to roughly $50 billion, about $1,300 taken out of the Canadian economy for every person in the country. He made it clear that while Canada cannot control what the United States does, it can control its response, and that response would be nothing short of transformational. The centerpiece of his announcement is an unprecedented plan to unleash more than $1 trillion in total investment over the next 5 years. This investment wave will target national infrastructure, energy development, housing construction, transportation networks, healthcare modernization, and the transition to low-carbon manufacturing. The government expects this push to increase national GDP by at least 3.5%. In Carney's own words, that's equivalent to more than $3,500 gained for every Canadian, far more than what U.S. tariffs have taken away. From the proposed high-speed rail line between Toronto and Quebec City to a $50 billion Build Communities Strong Fund to the modernization of outdated hospitals built in the 1970s, Carney's plan is not incremental change. It is a generational rebuild. He framed it plainly: fortune favors the bold, and this is the moment for Canada to act boldly.
It's estimated that U.S. tariffs and the uncertainty that they're creating will cost us around 1.8% of our GDP. Let me translate that. That's about $50 billion lost from our economy, or the equivalent of $1,300 for every Canadian.
Budget 2025 cannot be understood without the broader context of Trump's tariff escalation. During his second term, Donald Trump has expanded tariffs across nearly every major sector: autos, metals, chemicals, agriculture, consumer goods, and advanced manufacturing inputs. For decades, Canada benefited from the stability of the North American trading system, but under Trump 2.0, that stability no longer exists. Corporations are shifting production to the U.S. to avoid penalties. Investment decisions are being delayed or canceled, and long-standing supply chains are under constant political pressure. Canada has already felt the fallout. Stellantis moved Jeep Compass production from Ontario to Illinois. GM scaled back electric van production in Ingersoll. Multiple exporters are facing higher costs and shrinking margins. Carney's government understands the new reality. The U.S. is not going to return to predictable cooperative trade policy anytime soon. The old assumptions about continental integration no longer hold. Budget 2025 is Canada's structural answer to that reality.
Rather than meet American tariffs with retaliation, Carney is executing a very different strategy. He is treating U.S. economic pressure as a catalyst to supercharge domestic investment. His formula is simple and aggressive. If the U.S. takes $50 billion of economic output away through tariffs and uncertainty, then Canada should generate hundreds of billions in new value through nation-building projects. In other words, instead of fighting tariff with tariff, Carney is fighting tariff with growth. The budget's investments are designed to reshape Canada's industrial base from the ground up. Modern transit systems, expanded energy grids, advanced factories using Canadian steel and Canadian lumber, digital public services built on AI, and millions of new homes built with faster methods and cleaner materials. It is an approach rooted in economic sovereignty. It asserts that the most effective response to U.S. protectionism is not escalation, but independence.
The domestic political implications are enormous. For Carney, Budget 2025 is not just an economic plan, it is a defining statement about what kind of country Canada wants to be in an era of global instability. His contrast with the conservative opposition is sharp. While conservatives emphasize spending cuts and deficit reduction, Carney is arguing that underinvestment poses a greater threat to the country's long-term stability than higher short-term spending. His message appeals directly to Canadians who feel squeezed by inflation, housing shortages, and slowing economic growth. Carney's repeated line, "We choose Canada," is crafted to tap into a broader sentiment. He is positioning himself as the leader willing to move beyond the old model of relying on U.S. markets and instead build a more self-sufficient, more resilient national economy. It is bold, it is risky, and it signals the clearest break yet between Ottawa and Washington's economic philosophies.
In the United States, Trump's advisors will see Budget 2025 as a strategic threat. Over the last year, the Trump administration has tried to use tariffs to force production, jobs, and investment into American territory. Carney's trillion-dollar blueprint undermines that logic. If Canada succeeds in modernizing its infrastructure, diversifying its trade partners, and building a stronger domestic manufacturing ecosystem, then Washington's ability to pressure Ottawa will decline sharply. Carney is essentially flipping the script. Instead of being squeezed by U.S. policy, Canada may come out stronger, more globally competitive, and less vulnerable to American leverage. That is the opposite of what Trump's team wants, and it will undoubtedly shape U.S. policymaking in the months ahead.
Budget 2025 is one of the most ambitious economic undertakings in modern Canadian history. It treats U.S. tariffs not as a crisis to endure, but as a spark for renewal. It is built on the belief that Canada can outperform the forces working against it, grow faster than expected, and redefine its place in a rapidly changing world. Yet the question remains, will Canadians embrace this scale of ambition? And how will Washington respond if Canada begins to rise as a more independent economic power? The answers will determine whether Budget 2025 becomes a turning point that reshapes Canada's future or merely the opening move in a much larger confrontation between Ottawa and Washington. Either way, the stakes have never been higher, and the world is watching.